Guess what we just had? We had a mid-season classic that was pretty classic. This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, look at me. Look, there's my lower third. Call me Sully, or as I'm called here, Sully Baseball, as opposed to Sully Tennis, where I do Locked On Tennis. You didn't know that. That's my secret. Go subscribe to Locked On Tennis. Hey, I am a baseball podcaster for the last the last decade or so, but the last 5 seasons here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And by the way, as the landscape of sports media is changing, you can rely on the Locked On Podcast Network, where we have your team covered: basketball, football, hockey, college football, baseball, all that. If you don't believe me, let's say you're an Arizona Diamondbacks fan and you want to have a daily podcast. That's when you listen to this guy.
Yeah.
Whose name is
Millard Thomas, host of the wonderful Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Hopefully the listeners really think your legal name is Sully Baseball. I just think that'd be a kind of funny, runny joke for everyone. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for the personal account. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks about Twitter, Instagram for the podcast. And please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
Yeah, and follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast and Instagram. Hey, let's talk about it. All right. All-Star game just ended, about 15, 20 minutes ago?
Yeah.
And it was a pretty thrilling, I got to say, it was a pretty thrilling game. It was a pretty thrilling ball game. It was, for the most part, well pitched. I do find it a little frustrating that no pitcher I don't think one American League pitcher and no National League pitcher went more than an inning. It's tough I know managers don't want to see their pitchers going 5-6 innings. No. It'd be nice to see a pitcher, I don't know, go more than one. But I will say, if this went into extra innings, and for a minute there it looked like it was going to, they were going to have a tie-breaking home run derby. Now, do you know who had that idea? Do you know who said that out loud?
You?
In 2002, when they ran out of pitchers and they declared the All-Star game a tie, and there was a famous shot of Bud Selig going, well, what am I supposed to do? I remember I was watching the game with Emmy Award-winning comedy writer Dan Cronin, and I said, just have a home run derby decided. And think about it. That year you would have had Sosa, you would have had Bonds, you had Giambi, who are some of the other big ones? So in 2000, McGuire was already retired at that point, but you had Manny Ramirez,
Griffey.
Griffey, I believe Griffey was still playing at that point. Jim Tomei was still playing. Think about the bombs you would have had. That was pre-screening your P days in baseball. Alex Rodriguez was on this. I mean, everybody. Think about the bombs. Albert Pujols. Think about the home runs you would have had in that home run derby. But they would have had it be a tiebreaker here, and I think that's great. And I think that's one of the let's be positive for a few things here. That's one of the changes they made to the All-Star game, which I think is terrific. So it's not going to go 11, 12, 13 innings. It's going to go tiebreaker.
And I wouldn't be mad at all if they wanted to bring that change to real Major League Baseball. It doesn't seem like anyone is in love with the ghost runner on second rule, and I definitely don't want to watch an 18-inning baseball game either.
Well, how about you do that after? Well, I mean, I've been on record saying I'm all for a tie after 12.
I'm cool with that too.
Yeah. But if you don't like a tie, then have a home run derby after 12. But let's also. I'm going to say one of the great things about today's game, and one of the things that really frustrated me about today's game, and they're linked. The hero of the game was Elias Diaz, who was basically the token pick for the Colorado Rockies. I mean, look, this is not a knock on Elias Diaz, who's obviously I don't care where you are. You are a player on the major leagues, and he is a player who he's an 18 home run hitter a few years ago as a part-time player. He's having a very good year this year for the Colorado Rockies, but the Rockies need to have a rep. He was their rep. They needed another catcher. He was their catcher. And it's funny, he came up against Bautista, who was lights out pitcher for the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, they flashed
And
that one graphic, 18 Ks per 9 innings, which is insane.
absolutely insane. And it was Castellanos, who always seems to be having an at bat whenever something happens. He was on second base, and I remember saying to our family friend who we were watching the ball game with today, I said they should bunt him over. Diaz should bunt him over, get him into scoring position, and give Riley and Albies a chance to do it. And Diaz is glad he did not listen to my advice, because he didn't bunt him over. He hit one in Edgar Martinez land and lifted a home run and gave the National League a 3-2 lead, and put himself in position to be the MVP of the All-Star game. So there you go. The token pick becomes the star. But then Thompson of the Phillies, the manager, decided to give it to Craig Kimbrell, and every Red Sox fan had their hearts in their mouth going, oh, I remember this guy, the guy who will pile up 40 some odd saves, and you'll sweat your body weight during every single one of them. And lo and behold, 2 outs, nobody on, and everyone got flashbacks to, oh, this is Craig Kimbrell, where he walked 2 batters, including hometown hero Julio Rodriguez, before finally getting the strikeout to save the National League's first victory since Melky Cabrera of the Giants, before he got suspended, helped beat the helped beat the American League in 2012. So hey, Elias Diaz gets to some token pick. He's etched himself into All-Star game history.
Yeah, Diaz was really good. I mean, Paul Holden called it in our Locked On chat.
That's
Diaz,
right. He did.
Yeah, Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies was able to call it. So really cool moment there for Diaz. I don't know if I don't mind seeing, because with the All-Star game, there's just so many pitchers. So I feel like you have to just do the 1 inning thing. I mean, the American League threw out like 20 dudes because they had each dude just have like 2-3 batters at a time. And most of those guys didn't even finish an inning, which is crazy. But just real quick on Craig Kimbrell, he's a 9-time All-Star. I was just wondering, do you think Craig Kimbrell is a Hall of Fame believer?
You know what? He has been he's a fine pitcher who's had a wonderful career. I made the joke because he gave Red Sox fans heart attacks throughout the postseason in 2018. He's piled up a lot of saves, and he's had some undeniably great seasons, especially when he was pitching for Atlanta. I don't know. There's a lot of times you get guys who pile up tons of saves because they come in the way the save rule is set up. If you come in, it's a 3-run lead. If you only let up 2 runs, you get the save. I don't know. I haven't given enough thought to his career. I think Billy Wagner, who's not in the Hall of Fame, felt like a Hall of Fame closer. He was a dominant pitcher. When I think about the pitchers who came in and were real difference makers, I felt Craig Kimbrell compiled saves. And again, I could be totally wrong about this. I haven't done my homework on this, and I'm just mainly having flashbacks of that 2018 season where he just, I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat, screaming like, no, don't put anybody else on.
I only asked because when I saw today that he made his 9th appearance in All-Star game, I was just kind of floored by it. I was like, 9 seems like a lot. And when you look at the statistics, he's got like a 2.37 career ERA, over 400 saves, 14 Ks per 9. I think statistically it's going to be tough. Like a guy like David Ortiz has 10 All-Star appearances, and Kimbrell's already at 9 at 35 years of age. He just might make it based off this
Maybe.
statistical argument. And
Maybe.
then also just real quick on your Elias Diaz point, I am so glad he did not go up there and bunt. This is the All-Star game,
You're
son.
right.
I want to see people swinging for the fences, okay? I don't need
You're
you
right.
to do the minutia of like, let's do a little small ball. No, swing for the fences. I'm glad Diaz thought he was back at Coors Field.
I am too. I'm
Yeah.
saying I was dead wrong. I was completely dead wrong. But I'll tell you something that a change they've made to the All-Star game that I'd like them to not do anymore.
Oh,
My favorite part of and there are a lot of times I'll watch old All-Star games on YouTube, but I never watch the game. I love it when all the players line up and they're introduced and they tip their hat. And you go down the line, you see all the players, and they're all in their uniforms. And then when you see a player from your team do something worthwhile in the playoffs or in the All-Star game, like when I remember growing up, and I remember seeing, Jim Rice and Fred Lynn hitting a home run in the All-Star game, and later Roger Clemens was the MVP of one All-Star game, and then of course in '99 with Pedro Martinez on the mound, striking out all these juiced up batters left and right. They were doing it in their Red Sox uniforms. And if you saw a player, you saw Reggie Jackson hit the home run off of Doc Ellis, he was in his A's uniform, that they're in their uniforms. And so probably Elias Diaz's home run might be the highlight for the Colorado Rockies and their fans. And he's not even wearing a Rockies uniform at the point. And it also made watching the game difficult. Beyond like lining up and seeing the pageantry of all the different uniforms and them tipping their caps, they're now wearing these, the uniforms didn't look bad. It's just which team are they for? They're not a team you want to see them wearing those. I had no problem with an All-Star game hat. I really didn't. If they wanted their regular uniforms, they have an All-Star game hat, fine. They've done that a few years. I remember doing it in 2014, 2015. I thought it looked kind of cool. Some of those hats are actually kind of badass. But to just have a completely different uniform that is completely a nondescript, and also it wasn't always clear who was up.
yeah.
I remember when Jose Ramirez came up at one point, he hit a double. I said, "Who hit that? I don't know. I don't even know what team he's on." And that's part of the game. That's my guy. That's my guy. Look at a guy in a Red Sox or a guy in a White Sox or whatever uniform your team is wearing. If you're a Rockies fan, that's my guy. My guy hit that home run. And it made it sounds like a nitpicky thing, but my friend and friend of the podcast, Gar Renes, aka the batting stance guy, check him out on YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel. He's been on Letterman and all these great shows imitating players. He was posting all these things on his page of the All-Star game team pictures of the past, and they're all in their different uniforms. And you see the Astros uniform next to the Dodgers and all that. And that's part of the fun of it. And that's part of the pageantry of it. And as my friend of the family, Dolph Pfefferbaum, said, who the hell is going to buy an All-Star game jersey?
Yeah, I think I'm indifferent in terms of whether a player wears the American jersey or their actual team jersey. My biggest issue is because I'm gonna get on my high horse a little bit here. So, because I'm a graphic designer, I'm making jerseys, I'm making uniforms, and guess what? I think for me, it's more about the execution of the jersey. I don't really care if Devers is wearing a Boston Red Sox jersey in the All-Star game or if he's wearing an American League jersey. I just care about how the jersey looks. And the American League and the National League jerseys this year just look bland. They're boring, and I absolutely hate the star being used as like the little A in American or like the little A in National. I think that is just so lazy, and I don't understand why they moved in this direction this year, because if you look at last year's uniforms, they did exactly what you said. They had all the uniforms color-coded the same, but it still said New York across it, or it said San Diego. They just matched the color theme to whether it was American League or National League. In the past, when they've done, they did this past year, but in the past, they've done American and National, and they match it to the city. But in 2019, 2021, they went back to putting the team in front. But then this year, they went back to doing American and National. I don't know why baseball keeps flip-flopping between those two decisions to either put the team name on it or just put the league name on it. But whatever you do, they need to just update the design. They have a whole year You're going to have 365 days, probably more like 10 months, but you're going to get a lot of time to design these jerseys. I don't know why, after so much time, all the money that baseball has, this is the best version of the jersey that they could put out. You're in an all-star game. This is where you want to increase the exposure. Of course, you're not going to probably have insane sales from all-star game jerseys, like you said, but you still want to add that pizzazz. You still want to turn on TV and be like, dang, those MLB players look cool. And right now, it's like, it's hard to gravitate to the sport of baseball in terms of fashion and pop culture. And you're like, man, I would never wear that jersey outside.
And just one more quick thought. It's not like in basketball where they have to be coordinated because you don't want to pass it to the wrong person.
Yeah.
You're not going to throw the ball to the wrong person. It's pretty clear who's on offense and who's on defense. But hey, when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about the second half of baseball, which is about to start.
Let me tell our listeners about my favorite Bird Dog shorts, because Bird Dogs were nice enough to send every Locked On host a pair of shorts. And I got to tell y'all, I'm wearing it right now. These are the most comfortable pair of shorts I've ever worn. Bird Dogs make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. I'm a person that hasn't worked out in the last couple months, but when I put on my pair of Bird Dog shorts, people are like, dang, Millard, did you just run a 5K race? Because my thighs are looking fantastic. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. Bird Dogs fix the issue with stiff, restricting cotton by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement, which is, to me, it's all about movement and comfortability. So go to birddogs.com, use code LOCKEDONMLB, or go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB and use promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB or promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you.
Let's take a look. Some of the teams that were super disappointing the first half of the year may be poised for a second half rebound. Who do you think is most likely to have a turnaround?
Yeah, I saw the broadcast during the All-Star game mention the New York Mets a couple times as a team in the second half that could get hot. I don't really like the New York Mets. I don't really get good vibes. A team that I'm going with, actually, they're not even like, they weren't like a struggle in the first half. They just weren't like amazing, and they play in a division where they have 5 teams above 500. But I think they're going to separate in the second half from those bottom 2 teams, the Yankees and Boston Red Sox. I'm talking about the Toronto Blue Jays, who I think is just loaded with talent. You got the home run derby champ of Vlad Guerrero Jr., who could take off in the second half. Dalton Varsho, I know he's been struggling, but he's historically been a second half player for the D-backs. You're loaded in that rotation. Manoah just got recalled. If he can refine his form, because he looked good in that first start back since getting recalled, I like the Blue Jays a lot. When I look at that rotation, when I look at that lineup, I don't know what happened to Jordan Romano. I know he left the All-Star game, right, potentially today. But I just think that Blue Jays team has been good in the first half. I think they could be great in the second half, with all that talent finally coalescing and everyone kind of hitting their stride at the same time.
You know, that's I can see that definitely happening. You know, and certainly pulling away. Um, you know, it's funny. One of the things that causes teams to have a good second half is consistency in their pitching staff.
Mhm.
And in the last month or so, going into this All-Star break, even a little more than a month, the best 1-2 pitching tandem has been Blake Snell and Joe Musgrove.
Ooh.
Like, they've pitched beautifully for a Padres team that has been one of the great disappointments in all of baseball this year. And I can't help but wonder. And again, LA is playing very well, obviously. The Diamondbacks have had a fabulous first half, and the Giants have streaked. But if the Diamondbacks and the Giants come back to the mean, and again, if I had said to you at the beginning of the year, would you take an 85, 86 win team from Arizona? You
Oh,
would have
yeah.
taken it in a heartbeat.
Sign me up.
If they regress and San Diego starts to play the way that they can, the fact that you have 2 pitchers, you know that 40% of your starts, you're going to get a good start. And and Melvin is a good enough manager to keep the ship going. I I don't give up on San Diego just yet.
I
I
don't hate
don't give
that.
up. Yeah.
And they're not exactly awful either. They're 4 games below 500. The
Right.
D-backs in their last, 24 games were, 11 and 13. It's definitely plausible that the Padres are there that can make a big second-half run. And also, when you think about the Padres team and, the makeup of that team, I mean, they're, of course, loaded with stars, but AJ Preller, that GM, if he feels like that team is in spitting distance and has a real shot of making the wild card, I don't think he's just going to sit on his hands at the trade deadline. So, you know what? I already acquired a bunch of stars the last couple of years. I've already signed a bunch of players. I think he'll probably will go out there, and maybe he's not trading for another Juan Soto level player at the deadline, but I wouldn't be surprised if he adds a nice little utility piece that could help out in the infield or outfield, or a nice reliever or starting pitcher. I don't know exactly what the needs are of the San Diego Padres off the top of my head. I mean, they're pretty loaded everywhere. They could probably use a little bit more depth in that lineup, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw aggressive AJ Preller at the deadline, because not like the Padres are dead in the water. They're 6.5 games back of the wild card. The teams ahead of them, I don't think you're super scared of. It's still teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Chicago Cubs. I definitely think the Padres would leap a couple of those teams in the second half. It just depends how aggressive do they really want to get at the deadline, as we talk about with a lot of these teams.
Yeah. The Mets obviously played very, very well down the last few weeks of the season before losing the last couple of games there. Um, I said the Padres in the American League. I mean, there's some teams. The thing about the Blue Jays that makes me think that they may have a really big second half, and they're on the cusp of the playoffs right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is Alek Manoah pitched very well when he came back.
Yeah.
Cy Young contender last year, had a horrible first half. They sent him down to sort of get his head straight. He got rocked his first game in the Florida State League, but he got himself together. And his first game back, he pitched great. And that's like making an acquisition. That's like acquiring an ace pitcher. And if Toronto can continue to play well and have their bats going well, and then add an Alek Manoah who's at least a facsimile of the pitcher who dominated last year, I think they may give everyone a run for their money. And keep in mind, remember how great Tampa Bay began the year? People were comparing to the '84 Tigers, and they're going to run away with the division. They're tied in the loss column with Baltimore right now.
It's crazy, yeah. And the Blue Jays, I mean, guys like Vlad Guerrero and George Springer, they're having fine seasons, but they're not having monster seasons like we've seen from them in the past.
But if they have if you're not even asking them to have a great season, if they have a really good, 2.5 months, then all of a sudden, I think that could be the difference. Now look at, do I think they're going to pass? They're going to make up 7 games? Actually, I don't know. They might, because Tampa Bay's starting rotation is in shambles right now. They had a horrible slump where they lost 7 straight games. And then Baltimore is playing, obviously Baltimore is playing great ball, but like the Diamondbacks, if I polled 1 million Orioles fans at the beginning of the year, said, would you be fine with 88 wins? I'd get 2 million yeses.
Yeah, they're basically the AL version of the D-backs, I like to say.
Right. So Toronto, more so than New York, who just brought in Sean Casey as a hitting coach.
They're lost.
And the Red Sox, the Red Sox have played great recently, but I also think they're playing a little bit above their heads too. I think the Red Sox are aiming to be above 500 and have a couple of their prospects in place, so they can go into 2024 in a buy now mode. But Toronto is a team that I think could have a dynamic second half. I still would wish they had a different manager, which takes us a little bit to our segment to our topic in segment 3. I'm still not crazy about their manager, but I'll proudly eat crow if he does take him to the division title.
Yeah, and then just one final AL team that might be kind of obvious is a second half boom. They're only 2 games back of the AL West division lead, but the Houston Astros, who are always there in the mix, Yordan Alvarez, who was arguably the second best position player after Aaron Judge, of course, if we don't count Shohei Ohtani, Jose Altuve, you're going to have him the full second half. I think that's another team who can just go up another level because we know about their championship experience. We know about that equity, and they're just a team that's going to be there at the end, like we've seen every single season since 2017. So they're basically the Golden State Warriors to me. I'm never counting out the Houston Astros. I will honestly take the Astros versus the field every single season, at least to get to the championship series until I see that they can't do it anymore.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Now, look at, like everyone, we've all had some hard moments over the last bunch of years. It's been a rough few years. I've had some situations in my life that have been, that's been tough. I had the death of my father. I've had uncertainty with my job. Obviously, everything going on in the world, whether it was, economic, pandemic, emotional, all the stuff happens, and it can be overwhelming. And you know what? The path to deal with everything in life, it's not always clear, and it's seldom a straight line. And trying to find that path on your own, that's not always the right thing to do. And I'll be honest with you, therapy has helped me. It's helped me navigate the waters of life that are sometimes rough and choppy. And sometimes it helps me articulate my worries. Sometimes it helps me challenge my preconceptions. And sometimes it's been helpful just to get some of my concerns off my chest. I recommend therapy. And if you're thinking about therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? Look, it's entirely online. It's designed for your convenience, and you can work it around your schedule. Here's all you got to do. It takes all the fear and stigma out of it. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if the fit's not perfect. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Now look, here's what you should do. You should visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnMLB, and you'll get $10 off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. Give BetterHelp a try. All right, we're here with Millard Thomas. We're wrapping up this particular episode. Hey, no one's gotten my trivia question right, so I'm gonna have it go for one more day. Then I'm gonna tell the answer.
What is it?
5 pitcher. Do you want? Maybe I'll tell the answer now. We'll move on. No. I need to
Let
have.
me
I
get a
need
question first. I don't know what it is.
5 pitchers in the history of baseball have thrown a no-hitter in both the American League and the National League.
Okay.
4 of them are in the Hall of Fame. 1 of them is not. And this is not a situation where it's like, Clemens, where he'd be in the Hall of Fame if it wasn't for the PED stuff. No, this is not someone who anyone's putting in the Hall of Fame. But he's not that obscure a pitcher either. If you're a baseball fan of the last bunch of decades, you know who this pitcher is.
Okay.
And he's throwing as a member of the American League, as a member of the National League. You have 4 Hall of Famers did it. Cy Young did it. He's in the Hall of Fame. Jim Bunning did it. He's in the Hall of Fame. Nolan Ryan did it. He's in the Hall of Fame. Randy Johnson did it. He's in the Hall of Fame. This other pitcher did it. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Who is he? So, but I'll give you no more hints.
I'm just going to look up baseball no-hitters and then just figure out who's not in the Hall of Fame.
That's pretty well. I can't imagine no one's done that already.
Yeah.
By the way, who do you think's on the hot seat right now? I think there's one big one, but tell me who you think is.
This was tough for me because I didn't have like a perfect candidate for this because I feel like it has to be a team that's underperforming expectations. But the issue is when I looked at those teams, a lot of them had like managers that's been there for like 2 years or less. Like the Padres, you got Bob Melvin, they're struggling, but he's been there for like less than 2 years. Buck Showalter of the Mets, he's been there for less than 2 years. The St. Louis Cardinals guy, he's been there less than 2 years. Like most of these teams, it's kind of hard to make a sound argument. I think the best one I have, and I think you brought this up on a previous podcast before, I'm looking at the LA Angels. I'm looking at their manager just because You're going into this season with Shohei Ohtani as an impending free agent. You want to put the best situation on the field and to go into a season where you have the interim manager from the previous year just carry over into the new year. Usually when that happens, that means you just didn't have any options. You didn't like anybody out there, or you just don't know what you're doing, because we've seen it time and time again. There has been other cases where you get the interim manager for the half season, then he rolls over to the next season. And usually those guys don't last too long. And usually those guys don't end up being long-term managers. There's a reason why they just have that interim title for just a little bit. We just saw it with the Cavs in basketball this past season with JB Bickerstaff. I think the Angels should have went out there, and maybe, I don't know who the perfect candidate is, but they probably should have went out there and at least got someone that has that brand name behind them, like what the Padres and Mets did the last couple of years with Bob Melvins. We could even done what the Rangers did with Bruce Bochy. Like, there's so many managers that have been on the market last year, so much playoff experience, World Series titles, and maybe your situation is still the same in terms of that win-loss total on your record, but in terms of the culture in your locker room, in terms of just how you're viewed as a fan, as a franchise, having a big boy as your manager who's been there, who's been through the wars, instead of just this interim title guy who just kind of like feels temporary, but he doesn't really feel like your long-term solution. I just don't think, if you're trying to market to the greatest thing we've ever seen hit Major League Baseball to stay here long-term, I don't think telling him as he's entering free agency, yeah, we're not really sure what we're doing as manager. We just kind of have a guy that's holding it down, babysitting the position, but we don't really know how we feel about him.
I don't know how Phil Nevin still has his job. I mean, this is. I don't know how anyone there still has their job, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought up Bruce Bochy. You know, everyone knows does a drink when I say Bruce Bochy's lieutenants. Roberto Kelly's right there. You know, Ansley Mullins is right there with the pedigree of Bruce Bochy behind him. I would say Joe Madden, but Joe Madden's been there, done that in with the Angels.
Isn't that kind of crazy though? The best manager available is the one that they fired, probably.
I think Joe Madden should be the manager of the Blue Jays. Absolutely should be the manager of the Blue Jays. I don't understand why he isn't right now. I mean, no offense, John Schneider, but I mean, yeah, if they do well with John Schneider, then fine. Congratulations. I don't understand how John Schneider made it to this year. But since I called for his firing at the end of May, the Blue Jays have been on a roll. So I got to give credit where credit is due. I can't help but wonder if Buck Showalter is going to get fired. He won Manager of the Year last year.
Which is crazy.
And I don't think that the Mets disappointing this year is necessarily his fault. He's made some weird managerial decisions, to be fair, but I don't think it's his fault. But I also sometimes there's the great line from Clint Eastwood's film Unforgiven. He said, "Deserving's got nothing to do with it," and they have an angry fan base, huge off season of superstars. And someone needs to be thrown to the lions. I don't think it's right, but I think Showalter will probably be fired. The Yankees fired their hitting coach because that was the problem. And they brought in Sean Casey to essentially be a cheerleader because, as Stacy and Steve said on Locked On Yankees, they said they're not going to change their approach to hitting. They're just going to fire the hitting coach. Okay, that's fine. We're going to fire the chef, but we're going to keep all the recipes the same. Sean Casey is clearly there when people say, "Well, has he ever played?" Yeah, Sean Casey played. Sean Casey was a fine player and an excellent pure hitter, and Aaron Boone's teammate, and they needed a scapegoat. There is the possibility that the Yankees could finish in last place. How do I know this? They're only one game out of last place right now. And all the Red Sox have to do is play 2 games better than the Yankees the rest of the way. And the Blue Jays have to play as well as the Yankees the rest of the way. If those 2 things happen, the Yankees are going to finish in last place, albeit probably with a winning record. But with that, I think Aaron Boone may finally be on the hot seat, because if they miss the postseason, because that's the thing they always say, well, the postseason's a crapshoot. So it's not that much of a crapshoot. If you construct a roster that everything is based upon how many home runs can we hit, which everything seems based on that doesn't work in the postseason when you know you're going to face good pitching.
Yeah.
And so I do think Aaron Boone is mildly on the hot seat. but I think absolutely Phil Nevin and John Schneider. I don't think anybody and Buck Showalter. I don't think anyone else really has a chance to be fired.
Yeah, I think Yankee fans all consider Aaron Boone on the hot seat. I think they probably thought that the last couple of years and wouldn't be upset at all if the Yankees went a different direction. It's just tough because, like, listening to baseball podcasts, it just seems like Boone is so entrenched with Cashman, and Cashman is so entrenched with that ownership. That's like those are the three musketeers. That grouping is never going to split up. And if you look at Boone's like resume with the Yankees, like it's harder to make an argument as to why he should be fired than not, because he's like 95 plus wins every year as a regular season team. And they've been to 2 championship series in like the last 6 years under Boone. So even though they haven't been able to get to the mountaintop, we have this highest level of expectations for the Yankees franchise. But if it was any other franchise with Aaron Boone doing what he's doing with the New York Yankees, it would be singing the praises of 95 plus wins and championship series.
But it's not.
No.
Now, the other organization, which is going to have a decade without a World Series appearance, I don't think Oliver Marmol should be fired. I didn't think John Schilt deserved to be fired with the Cardinals. But President John Mozeliak, there's if you listen to Locked On Cardinals, the rumors are going on. They may be trading Nolan Arenado. And if they do, then I'm sorry. He's got to go, because he's had the car keys for a while. And they have not appeared in a World Series in a decade. And if they've traded away Cy Young winners, Cy Young contenders, MVP candidates to bring in the superstars to put them over the top, and then are going to be selling the superstars at pennies on the dollar, I'm sorry, you got to take the car keys away from them.
I mean, the Cardinals are probably the most disappointing team this year just because of the division they're playing in and how bad they're looking. I mean, because they're still loaded with talent. Paul Goldschmidt still have a fantastic season. Nolan Arenado has picked it up. This is like the first month. They're loaded with young talent. Adam Wainwright should have retired 8 years ago, but like that's still a solid team on paper. I don't understand how they're in last place in that division. The one other manager that I gave consideration to, because I do think he's a good manager, I do think what he's done with his team the last few years has been quality as well, but he's been with his franchise for like 6-7 years now. He does only have one playoff appearance, but he was able to break the longest playoff drought in Major League Baseball history. Scott Servais with another year with the Mariners, looking like they might miss the postseason. They made it last year, but then it's really like 7 years, one playoff appearance for Scott Servais. I don't know how much that's his fault, because the Mariners franchise has been such, in disarray for so many years. I think they actually have a good core and are actually building the right way and have, moving toward the right direction. But I don't know if they want to change it up and start building a new culture with a new leader as the forefront.
I think he'll be there beginning of next year, but with they have to get out to a great start. Well, you always get off to a great start. I always get off to a great start. And Millard Thomas, tell people where they can follow your show.
Yeah, you can follow me on all streaming platforms. You can listen to the show. Follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks about Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle, and please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
You follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully, Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Getting ready to get off to a great second half after a fabulous All-Star game. But let's mix up the uniforms a little bit. This has been Locked On MLB. Locked On Diamondbacks crossover for July 12th, 2023. He's Millard Thomas. I'm your pal Sully. Let's fist pump again.